Hello and welcome to the Lost Boys set review for Chapter 2, Rise of the Floodborn from Disney's Lorcana. I'm Tandy, and that's Harlan, and we are bringing you Steel in today's video. Harlan, so far we've talked about a lot of cards from other colors and stuff, but Steel, it happens to be one of my favorite colors. What is your general thoughts on the color Steel?
It is definitely one of my favorites. I really like the steel cards in general. I have kind of shied away from playing them because kind of the best thing to do was like the Amber Steel Stitch Rockstar stuff. And, that doesn't really vibe with me as much. And, I'm
what
really
a
hoping
chump. What a chump. Doesn't like Stitch Rockstar. You even play Stitch Rockstar in your Amber Sapphire deck, but it was just significantly worse.
Yeah, I think it's really the whole new world stuff that I don't enjoy as much.
Look, if they banned Whole New World tomorrow, I wouldn't care. I would still just play Stitch Rockstar in every deck, man. I just love that card.
I would actually maybe start once that happened. But I really hope that the steel cards in Chapter 2 can mix it up enough that, there are various steel decks and not just like Amber Steel is the best thing to do. Granted, the Queen fits right into that, but hopefully... Yeah, we'll get into these cards and it'll inspire me.
All right, so let's begin. We're going to start from top down. The most expensive card in Steel is going to be Goofy, Night for a Day. This is a 9-cost inkable 10/10. That's the biggest thing I've ever seen, Harlan. And it quests for 4. Seems like some really hefty stats on what we're calling some Nillas, some vanilla creatures.
Yeah, some Nilla wafers up in the house. Yeah, Goofy is large. I don't know if he's in charge or not, but he is definitely big.
All I know is if they ever give me like a just in time for a 9-drop, this thing you can do a lot worse than a Goofy Night for a Day. This thing is enormous.
You put this in over Maleficent Monstrous Dragon?
If I'm playing Steel, I will. I'm just saying. This is
that's fair.
It's just a big thing, and like.
Is it a big Goofy thing?
Yeah. Okay. So like if you compare this to something like Brave Little Tailor, Brave Little Tailor is huge and evasive and quests for 4. This isn't evasive, but a 10/10 basically has evasive because no one is shipping into a 10/10 unless they are like 3 or 4 trading into it. 10 willpower is just an enormous amount. All right, next up we have Queen of Hearts, Capricious Monarch, 7-cost inkable 5/6, pretty decently statted. Quest for only 1, that's pretty awkward. The ability Off with Their Heads. Whenever an opposing character is banished, you may ready this character.
Yeah, this card needed more lore for me to really, hit the level I needed it to. As is, I don't see me ever getting this into a deck.
Look, not everyone can play Beast Relentless because Emerald is the worst color, let's be honest. But Steel is one of the best colors, and if we get a slightly more expensive Beast Relentless, obviously this is a bit harder to turn on, but I mean, look, we're in Steel. We have AoE, we have sweepers, we have all sorts of ways to banish characters via combat and outside of combat. I could see this being a nice top end, but there is some stiff competition, which we'll be moving on to in our next card, and what is one of my favorite cards in the set, Cinderella Stouthearted. This is a 7-cost inkable 5/5. The quest for 3 has shift 5. Pretty expensive to shift, all things considered, but there are plenty of Cinderellas that you can shift onto for a little bit cheaper. And has resist 2, which means that anything that would deal damage to it is reduced by 2. And the ability, the Singing Sword. Whenever you play a song, this character may challenge ready characters this turn. That is a dynamic effect that is not on anything in Chapter 1 and is only on a few cards in Chapter 2.
Yeah, this card is the real deal. Like, 3 points of lore is massive. 5/5 with resist 2 is massive.
Unkillable.
Has shift. It has a super relevant ability. This card's... Expect to see a lot of this card.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hefty price tag as well. I expect it to stay or get it more expensive over time. As we get more Cinderellas, we'll have more ways to shift. Right now, we actually have a Cinderella we'll talk about later that goes really well into like the Steel Amber shift, Stitch Blitz decks that we've been seeing a lot of in early Pixelborn Constructed. And I can only imagine that the Cinderella is just going to be a mainstay for quite some time just because of how unique the Singing Sword ability is. Next up is Hercules Divine Hero. This is a 6-cost inkable 6/3, the quest for 2. It has shift 4, so you can shift on a smaller Herc, and has resist 2. So it has a very similar ability to the 7-drop Cinderella, but a little bit smaller stats, but more strength, and it costs less.
Yeah, this card is very enticing to me. I don't know how much play it will really see. Just there's a lot of tension with a lot of good shift characters in kind of this realm where, it's not just a deck building constraint of I got to get 4 of this card in my deck. It's like I got to get 4 of this card and some things to shift onto in my deck. That takes up a lot of slots. Mm-hmm. And, this card is good and strong, but like Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, it is not,
No, that's fair. That's fair.
It is really good against Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, though.
Resist is a cool ability that I've only gotten to play a little bit with yet. And I'm excited to see just how it meshes out because I feel like that's the type of ability that's going to dominate in like a limited environment, like with the starter decks fighting each other, drafting, sealed deck, that type of thing. And right now, though, it's just competing with significantly stronger cards at that cost. Next up, we're going to be talking about Pacha, Village Leader. This is a 6-cost inkable 4/8. It's huge. Quest for 2, but it's a Nilla. What do you think about Pacha?
It says don't be fooled by the folksy peasant look. It definitely has a folksy peasant look.
So that was kind of the joke, right? So Cusco thought, that Pacha was the villain or whatever, but mostly It was just like, no, he's just a guy. Next up, we have Kronk, Junior Chipmunk. This is a 6-cost inkable 4/5, the quest for 2. It has resist 1. It says during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to chosen character. Kind of similar to the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, but just doesn't have a shift, doesn't have the enters the battlefield or enters playability. It does have resist 1, but that doesn't seem like it comes close to doing what Tinkerbell does.
True.
All right, next up, Beast Selfless Protector. This is a 6-drop that I think is phenomenal, and I want to hear as much as you want to talk about it. This is a 6-cost inkable 2/8. Quest for 1, and it has the ability Shield Another. When one of your other characters would be dealt damage, put that many damage counters on this character instead. It is a giant protective thing, and how's it play so far?
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of the card. I think it kind of gets sat on by, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy and the things like it. It is a card that interests me. It will, so like against Steel, for instance, it will absorb some damage, but it's also going to get also kind of oddly one-shot by like a Grab Your Sword. Right? Like if you have 3 other characters in play, it just dies to the Grab Your Sword. Granted, it saves the damage from the other characters. I was going to say,
isn't that great? Isn't it just saving all of your other little dorks?
Yeah, it's funny because it does protect them, but also not as well as you would think, because the damage also does pile up on it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a card that hasn't stood out to me yet, but time will tell on this card.
Yeah, I think we'll maybe see more play outside of Amber and Steel, maybe like Steel with another color that just really wants to protect some of its stronger but more vulnerable characters. Maybe Emerald, for example, is something we can pair with it, and having a way to keep all of your Cuscos and other things like that around a little bit longer. Things that quest for a high amount of lore that just really want that type of protection. But, 6 is a hefty amount. But it is inkable. That's what I really like about it. Next up, we have Li Shang. This is the archery instructor. It costs 5, is inkable, and you get a 3/6 that quests for 2 with the ability Archery Lesson. Whenever this character quests, your characters gain evasive this turn. So what that means is they can challenge other evasive characters. pretty medium effect, but evasive seems to be popping up all over the place in Chapter 2, and having some good defense against that might be worthwhile.
Absolutely, yeah. Steel is a color that typically has struggled against evasive cards, especially ones that have more than 2 willpower, so you couldn't clean them up with something like a Rapier Sword. And, this is a nice, clean way to put a way to just challenge them into your deck on a card that isn't like that poorly statted. I could easily see playing like 1 or 2 of these in a steel deck if you really find yourself struggling with evasive cards.
Next up is Donald Duck, Deep Sea Diver. This is a 5-cost inkable, 6/5, quest for 1, nil a wafer. What you think about this one? Is the stats doing anything for you? 6/5 is pretty large.
Yeah, the inverse of Cerberus is not a plus on this one.
That is one thing that we talked a lot about in the early days of the game, is that willpower being high often gives it more virtual card advantage whenever you get into challenging and things like that. And 6 strength is about the same as 5 strength in a lot of scenarios. But 5 willpower and 6 willpower are a large, like a delta between them. Next up is the Beast Tragic Hero. This is a 5-cost inkable 3/5, quest for 2. It does shift for 3, so it can shift onto a smaller beast. With the ability, it's better this way. At the start of your turn, if this character has no damage, draw a card. Otherwise, he gets +4 strength this turn. So, turn you play it, your opponent doesn't do anything to it. Next turn when you're ready with it, you draw a card. Somehow it has some damage on it, or it's been around for a few turns and it's still alive somehow. It's pretty large, hitting your opponent's stuff for 7.
Yeah, this card didn't stand out to me on the initial spoiler. This card is disgusting.
Yeah?
It's very good. It's at
a nice spot on the curve, too. 5, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it just threatens to draw a card every turn. Like, if your opponent's not in a deck that has Dragonfire or Let It Go or something like that, you just don't quest with it.
Yeah.
And then you just draw an extra card every turn. And it still threatens to challenge stuff. So, they don't have free quests either.
It reminds me a lot of, was it the 5-cost Queen from Amethyst that exerts to draw a card every turn? Normally, that Queen will exert once to draw a card and then die in combat. And but the strength of it comes from its ability to be activated multiple times over multiple turns. And if you're able to, keep your opponent's board in check with other things, she's able to do that sometimes and help you pull ahead. This seems like very similar to that card, but doesn't present itself as vulnerable from its own ability. And so that, coupled with the fact that you can play it with some heal effects like Rapunzel gifted with healing, means that maybe that card is just messed up.
It also, even when it's just threatening to do its thing unchecked, right? You get the card and 2 lore then.
Right.
It's not just the Queen where you get the card. So this card is strong. It is very strong, and expect to see it for a long time.
Awesome. Next up, we're going to talk about Namari Morning Mist. This is a new version of Namari we haven't seen yet. 4-cost uninkable 2/4. Has the bodyguard ability, so you may enter play exerted, an opposing character who challenges when your characters have to choose a bodyguard first. But the special ability is called Blades, and it says this character can challenge ready characters. The enchanted version is also really, really badass.
This character is just badass.
Yeah, she's the 4-cost iteration from Ruby that we talked about in a previous video is one of my favorite cards in the set after closer examination, and this is in the top 5 steel cards for me because it's another one of those steel cards that can challenge ready characters. This one you don't even have to go through any hoops like the 7-cost Cinderella Stouthearted. And so, Namari is just going to be an effective tool along with, maybe support characters or buff effects like the Queen, the Shift Queen that costs 5. And I think this card is just phenomenal.
Yeah, this card, so we've talked about how the board immediately stalls, where, nobody's willing to quest or challenge because of just getting blown out by a Rapunzel or a Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. This card just both insulates you from their being able to do it because it's a bodyguard, and breaks the parity of, okay, I'll just quest your thing that you didn't want to expose to my Rapunzel, and then I'll Rapunzel you anyway, because this can just challenge your ready things.
No, for
Crazy.
sure. The only downside on this, I think, is that it only has 2 starting strength, and so it'll likely need a little bit of help to get in. But, I mean, we've seen the new queen just do some really disgusting stuff out of Amber, so I think that this is a natural inclusion into many of those Amber and Steel decks, and I'm curious to see just how good it is. Next up is Tiana Celebrating Princess. This is a 4-cost uninkable 1/4, quest for 2. Has resist 2, so it's pretty difficult to kill. It says, what you give is what you get. While this character is exerted and you have no cards in your hand, opponents can't play actions. Now, this one's a little awkward with A Whole New World, because decks with A Whole New World either often have it rotting in their hand or they have a full hand of 7 cards. And so Tiana doesn't really work well with that specifically. But if you want to build a steel deck that doesn't play A Whole New World, maybe is more interested in curving up, Tiana is a great way to protect yourself from Be Prepared, Grab Your Sword, and a number of other of those big sweeper effects. I think this card is just really, really sweet.
Yeah, this card is sweet. It is certainly not my type of card. I really like having cards in my hand so I can formulate a plan where, you know, it's nice to be so far ahead that you've already played all your cards, and then you're like, all right, doesn't matter what I draw because I'm already killing you. But that's not really my style, so it's not. I'm sure I'll die to this card more than I play with it.
I really wish that it had Bodyguard. If that sounds just, I want to be able to play it exerted, you know, like just so that it's turned on the turn that I play it. If it's like my last card, that's the only thing that I wish was different about it. Everything else, it's pretty on point. You know, Unequable is a great drawback on something that's this uniquely damaging to like your opponent's potential game plan. 4 willpower with 2 resist means it's going to be very difficult to chop down via challenges, and so you know your opponent has a high likelihood of needing to hit it with Dragonfire, and when they can't, when you're empty-handed,
I think that's really the reason it doesn't have Bodyguard is it gives your opponent a window where it's like, hey, you're not going to be able to do this for the rest of the game. Have it now, or you know, it creates, instead of like your opponent's just locked out, it creates like a tension point. Yeah. Which is way better. And it leads to more dynamic games, you know, where like, oh, they could have a Tiana. I should really save a Dragonfire if I can. And like, if I can't, then like if they draw a Tiana, then I'm just screwed because I'll never be able to Dragonfire ever again. Yeah. Things like that.
I would maybe like to see a Steel and Sapphire deck that pairs it with a bunch of the ramp effects that play out from hand. So you either have the ability to play it as an ink in matchups where it's not good, or you have the ability to empty your hand quickly with Bell Strange with Special, so that you can just like make Ruby Amethyst life a living hell.
Yeah.
Next up, let's talk about Jafara the Dreadnought. 4-cost inkable 3/4, shifts for 2, quests for 1. Now, where were we? During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card. A lot of text on a card that's maybe not that good.
Yeah, this card intrigues me. I think there are just way too many good steel cards for me to end up actually playing with this, but it's a sweet card that I really, really hope to see around.
Yeah, also, Jafar as the big snake is also terrifying, and I just want to see more of it, so... Hopefully they put it on like a giant 7-cost thing at some point, and maybe it's better. But moving on, we have Ellie LaBouffe. This is a 4-cost inkable 2/5 that quests for 2. It's a Nilla. Does the 2/5 stat line change anything for you?
Nope.
Okay. See ya. Next up is Chief Bogo, respected officer. 4-cost uninkable 2/4 that quests for 2. Ability is Insubordination. When you play a Floodborn character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. This is a Floodborn payoff. This is something I can get behind.
Yeah, but for me, I'm just putting it on the bench. Maybe I'll throw him in later in the game.
Is that a joke? Or am I missing?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't really like the card that much.
I thought like
we
in the movie,
Floodborn characters. Yet.
You said put him on the bench, and I was like, maybe he was like in the basketball league or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he plays in the rec league.
Okay,
I don't know.
I've seen that movie once a long time ago.
Yeah, I need to rewatch Zootopia, especially when I'm going to be playing all these popsicles.
Yeah, no kidding. They're made of redwood, you know. So next up we have Beast Forbidding Recluse, 4-cost inkable 3/4, quest for 1. The ability is you're not welcome here. When you play this character, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. Finally! Something that comes into play and deals damage to an opposing character that's relatively cheap. I was hoping that they would put this on like a 2-cost 1/1 or something very similar. But a 4-cost 3/4 that shoots something for 1 has a lot of potential.
Yeah, pour one out for our boy Hans from Chapter 1.
See ya.
Whenever he quested, he dealt 1.
Yeah.
This card is, it doesn't have that second point of lore, but it does have that extra point of willpower, which we've talked about is a huge deal. Like each incremental increase in that is I don't want to say it effectively trades to a card, but like it puts you into a different caliber, different level of card.
Yeah,
for sure.
Each point of willpower is just like an extra hurdle for your opponent to jump through.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between the 3rd and 4th willpower is roughly the same as the 5th and 6th willpower, where at some point your opponent is just going to have to trade an extra card to deal with it, or have to have an extra effect or an extra combination of effects to finish it off. And the fact that you get the damage with immediacy means that Steel has a very aggressive answer to something like Lilo making a wish, but also it allows for just more combinations of different damage dealers to trade up on bigger and better things. Before we move on to our next card, I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to our sponsor, Games and Comics Paradise. Games and Comics Paradise is a store out of Fairfax, Virginia, specializing in TCGs such as Disney's Lorcana, but also Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon. Make sure to check out gcparadise.com for any of your TCG needs. We really appreciate them sponsoring the Lost Boys content, and we look forward to playing in some more of their events in the near future. Expect some announcements about some events from them in the next few weeks for January and February. The next card on our list for Steel is Weight Set. This is a 3-cost item that is inkable with the ability Training. When you play a character with 4 strength or more, you may pay 1 to draw a card. If I didn't have to pay the 1, I think this card might actually be pretty good. But the fact that I have to pay the 1 means that I'm going to be consistently off curve. And as we know in Lorcana, being off curve equals death.
Yes, equals death.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm sorry. This, funny enough, this actually reminds me a lot of a new card from Magic the Gathering called Up the Beanstalk, where it's like a cheap thing that whenever you play an expensive thing, you get to draw a card. But you don't have to pay a mana to do it. And also it draws a card when it comes into play. So Weight Set, not really punching above its weight class here, unfortunately. And we're just going to skip it. Now, next up is a card that has been seeing a ton of play in Pixelborn Ladder. This is Strength of a Raging Fire, the song from Disney's Mulan. This is a 3-cost inkable song that says deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. Tell me all about it, Harlan.
Yeah, this card is very strong, especially in Amber Steel decks that have the new Cinderella that is a Singer 3 as a 1-drop. That's really that's the bread and butter of this card, right? Is that you can sing it off of your 1-drop in your go wide strategy.
Right.
Again, those aren't really that's not really what I want to be doing. This is definitely more your wheelhouse.
I'll take this one then. Here. All right, here we go. So Strength of a Raging Fire is maybe the best removal spell in the game. And all I know is that it is very easy when I play Ember Steel Stitch Blitz to play 3 or 4 characters in the first 3 or 4 turns. And now that we have a 1-cost singer that can sing a 3-cost thing, we have the ability on the draw to play Cinderella. My opponent plays some 2-drop, and then I go 1 or 2 characters on turn 2, and then sing a removal spell on turn number 2 to kill something. And it's killing like Simba Protective Cub or some other maybe integral part of your opponent's strategy that is a 2-drop. It's a great song to pair with Ariel Spectacular Singer's musical debut ability to find it off the top of your deck. And it's inkable. There's nothing wrong with this card. It's exceptional.
Yeah, I think best removal spell in the game might be a stretch.
It's
I
a
think
song that costs 3. It's so good.
I think the best thing this does for me is it kind of that tension point in the games of the Amber Steel mirrors, like the whole new world Rockstar mirrors, where you both have built a board, but neither of you can really challenge or quest for fear of what your opponent can do to you.
Mm-hmm.
This almost incentivizes you when you don't have a Strength of a Raging Fire to force your opponent into trades by questing so that they can't build up to their Strength of a Raging Fire to clear like your Rockstar or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think this adds that extra dynamic that those games needed to actually be solving the board states a little bit cleaner, which is really interesting to me. And also from the side of somebody who has to play against these decks, it's like an extra hoop to jump through of like, oh, I really just need to clear your characters. That was kind of already what I wanted to do, but like I need to focus on that necessarily more than questing myself, because then you might just kill my good quester off of your removal spell after you play like 2 more characters. So I really like the tension that this card adds to the games. Is my favorite part of the card.
Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about shifting to sing the 5-cost songs like Grab Your Sword and A Whole New World off of like Rockstar and now the 5-drop Queen. But I think just doing one of those early shifts and then using that to sing the 3-drop to kill a small character just feels a lot to me like being able to play a free Fire the Cannons. And Fire the Cannons was already something people were playing in small numbers in the Amber Steel Stitch Blitz decks because they were so cheap and effective at handling the opposing 1 and 2 drops on the turns where you were playing your Whole New World. And so I think that it's just an enormous tempo play, and it just gives the 1-cost Cinderella just an absolutely stunning removal effect to be played in the first 3 or 4 turns. Next up, we're going to do another song that's seeing a little bit of play, a little less than the previous one, but Let the Storm Rage On. This is from Frozen, 3-cost uninkable. And it says deal 2 damage to chosen character, draw a card. So again, this is another one of those things that can be played alongside the 1-cost Cinderella and be sung to kill an opposing character for relatively cheap. This one replaces itself as well. I expect a couple of this and a couple of the previous song to be played in most of these Amber Steel Stitch Blitz decks because of how effective they are at being worked with the 1-cost Cindy.
Yeah, I find, again, I'm all about like the tension of deck building and the gameplay, and especially Lorcana, just all card games though, where this card versus Fire the Cannons, right? Do I choose efficiency or do I choose the upside of drawing a card? And the fact that this is a song, maybe I can sing it. Do I have a deck that has enough 3-cost characters that I want to be singing this? Am I playing Cinderella that can sing this? Mm-hmm. That is the most interesting thing to me with deck building in this game. And this card seems great to me, but also in the back of my mind, I know this is really clunky. And I don't know if I actually want to be playing this, even though for those of you from Magic may remember that I absolutely love Electrolyze. And this is pretty close. It's not quite the same, but like in the back of my mind, I know that this shouldn't actually be that good. So is it? Is it not? How many am I going to play? It's uninkable.
It is uninkable, and that is the stress test for sure.
Tune in next time on Lost Boys Z to find out.
All right, next up, we're going to move on to the Prince Who Never Gives Up. This is a 3-cost inkable, 1/3 quest for 2. That's a huge deal for this card. Has Bodyguard, and it has Resist 1. Resist 1 means it's going to take a lot to actually chop this thing down in combat, so it's a very effective bodyguard. And the fact that it quests for 2 means that in your aggressive decks that want bodyguards, it's going to push towards your endgame pretty quickly.
Yeah, this thing strikes me as very strong. Like, especially with the format kind of always revolving around Simba Protective Cub draws and being able to answer that early. This card, you would think, would get answered by all of the same things, but it takes 2 of all of those same things to answer this at once. which is just incredible in general because it lines up very well against your opponent's cards. But it also is an additional threat. So it's not even like you really took a turn off from really developing your board to play your bodyguard.
Right.
And then because your opponent basically has to pair cards up to remove this, that means they might have to just do it over 2 turns, which then sets them up even harder for like a Rapunzel to come down. And that's the hallmark of an amazing card in this game.
Yeah, I love that it's a cheap bodyguard that actually just survives a Rafiki hit. Rafiki is one of the best ways for Ruby Amethyst to actually punish the early aggressive draws out of steel. And Prince just being a brick wall there is really, really nice. I've personally played the 3-drop Hercules bodyguard a couple of times in my builds, and it's been relatively unimpressive. But this one strikes me as a significant upgrade.
It also lines up really well against Hook Duelist, the 1-drop, because Hook challenges in, does 2 damage to it, and then this takes it takes 2 and the Hook takes 1. But then this can eat the Hook without dying on the crackback.
Oh, because of the resist? I didn't think about that.
Yeah, exactly, because the Hook only has 1 strength when you're challenging it.
Yeah. All right, next up is Prince Naveen, Penniless Royal, 3-cost inkable 4/3. The quest for 1. Pretty generic Nilla creature, but it does have 4 strength for only 3 ink. What do you think?
They really nail it with the flavor text on some of these Nilla wafers. All he's got is his charm. There's nothing else going for him.
That's fair. All right, next up, Magic Broom, Industrial Model, 3-cost inkable, 2/3. Quest for 1 with the ability Make It Shine. When you play this character, chosen character gains resist 1 until the start of your next turn. So that's a full turn cycle. What do you think about this broom?
So the ability does not stand out to me as strong. It might matter. I think where this card is going to see play is with Mickey Sorcerer, because this is a broom. It costs less. It comes back to your hand when it dies.
Yep.
That is really interesting to me. And, I played a good amount of Amethyst Steel, like Pocket Watch Mickey combo. And, this is another broom. That's definitely something I'm going to revisit at some point and see if that's worth it, just more brooms makes your Mickeys work more. So it's interesting.
All right, next up, Lawrence, Jealous Manservant, 3-cost 0/4, quest for 2, is inkable. Payback, while this character has no damage, it gets 4 strength. So 3-cost 4/4, the quest for 2 on the first hit. So it's almost always eating 1 thing. This card seems like surprisingly okay.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of exceptionally bad in steel mirrors, which are probably going to be pretty common just because it's so easy to do like an incidental point to it, and then it's just a free challenge.
Okay.
But against a lot of decks, it might be pretty good, although Ruby has direct damage effects now with Teeth and Ambitions. So I think this card may end up just falling to the wayside before it really got to shine. But, if a lot of direct damage stuff isn't happening or isn't common and this is inkable, it definitely could fill some holes in some decks.
Next up is Benja, Guardian of the Dragon Gem, 3-cost inkable, 2/3, the quest for 2, with the ability We Have a Choice. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item. So essentially, Beast Hardheaded that cost 2 less, a slightly smaller body, but people were playing Beast Hardheaded just as a way to kill items, and this is just a way cheaper way to do that.
Yeah, this is an arguably better body for the cost because, sure, it's a 2/3, but it still has the 2 points of lore. So this is a legitimate threat on curve that is very relevant interaction because there's going to be more decks with items now with the Popsicle decks running around. And they, killing Popsicle doesn't really matter because that's kind of what they want to happen anyway. But all their other items to make sure they have enough items in their deck to turn on their cards, they care about those ones. It didn't already draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, item is also just a card type in the game that if they assume that it is a weak ability or a weak card type over time, they'll just start cranking the knob and they'll start making some items that are significantly better. And then you'll really start to see these cards that can kill items who maybe didn't see that much play because the items weren't very good. Now you're going to start to see things get a little juiced, and even the things that eat it get juiced too. So. Next up is Mouse Armor, another item. This one costs 2 and is uninkable. The ability is Protection. You can exert this to chosen character gains resist 1 until the start of your next turn. This one actually feels reasonably well costed, but I'm not a huge fan of this type of effect in general, and the fact that this is uninkable doesn't impress me much. But have you tried this at all, and what do you think?
No, I could see playing one in a deck that's like character focused, but then like, why am I not just? I don't know. It kind of misses the mark for me. I could maybe see it in like the bodyguard deck that plays the tabard, because obviously your stuff is going to get challenged. The whole point is they're bodyguards, and like they do challenging also. That could be interesting to me, but yeah, it's I don't know. It seems like it missed the mark for me.
All right, next up is Pick a Fight. This is a 2-cost action, uninkable, and it's got Wreck-It Ralph on it, so you know I like it. Chosen character can challenge ready characters this turn, so it grants it that fight ability that we've seen on 2 other cards already. And the flavor text, of course, is I'm going to wreck it.
I think best flavor text in the game on one of the worst cards in the game.
Aw. If this were a song maybe or something. But,
yeah, or if it was inkable. I could definitely see it seeing play. It's way too situational at uninkable.
Next up is Charge! This is a 2-cost action that is inkable, featuring Raya, the Last Dragon. And chosen character gains Challenger 2 and Resist 2 this turn. Another one of those kind of buff effects on a one-shot. Look, man, I've been playing this game for a couple months now, and when I first started playing with the starter decks, this is the type of card that I would cut first because characters were just so hugely more important. And this type of effect only being a one-shot just makes it so not useless, man, but just like so close to useless that it's basically useless.
Yeah, it giving resist and then not lasting through your opponent's turn is also weird, especially when Challenger doesn't matter that it's on your thing for their turn also. Like, I think they definitely could have just left it where you get the additional benefit. I still don't think it would see much play.
Yeah.
And maybe it would be more confusing. But yeah, I don't think this one's we're gonna see it very often.
All right, next up's the Huntsman, Reluctant Enforcer, 2-cost inkable 1/1, the quest for 2, and the ability Change of Heart. When this character quests, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. So a looter that can loot every turn while questing seems pretty cool.
Yeah, this one, it's weird to me too. Like, how often do you think your 1/1 is going to quest multiple times?
Depends on how many bodyguards you play, right? If the Prince 3-drop bodyguard that survives multiple hits, like maybe it gets multiple loots. Maybe this is the type of card that enables a deck that has 20 uninkables because you have so many ways to continuously loot, from that ability on the Huntsman to the 2-drop Cinderella we're going to talk about in just a moment, and even the 1-drop not Protective Cub, but Simba Future King. Yeah, these are all ways that we can loot. And I think this is also another card that later on, with more discard pile recursion, more things when you discard them, they do their ability, things like that. We're going to see that card, that type of a card, potentially get more useful over time as well.
Yeah, true.
Next up is Robin Hood, Capable Fighter, 2-cost uninkable 1/3. It quests for 1, and it has the ability Skirmish. You can exert this to deal 1 damage to chosen character. I think this card is like secretly cracked. The first time I ever saw it, the willpower was hidden behind another card when they were showing them, and I just assumed it was a 1/1 because an ability like this is pretty strong. The fact that it's an inkable kind of makes up for it. But 3 willpower means it might actually have, like, your opponent might actually have some trouble getting off the table because you're able to just like shoot down stuff kind of at will.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's funny to me because, so like we talked about 4-cost 3/3 Hans from Steel from Chapter 1 previously. And when that quested, it dealt 1 damage to any character, which this is that, but worse. Obviously it's a 2-drop. Because you don't get the lore, right? It's similar to that, you just don't get the lore. So they felt like giving it the same ability was not maybe too good.
Right.
But like to me, this strikes me as a card that's actually kind of weak as is, for being uninkable. But
Do
I
you
definitely
think
could be wrong.
Do you think it maybe goes into decks to play like Fire the Cannons and the Captain Hook, Captain of the Jolly Roger, so that you're just like, you have a bunch of things that pair with the 1 damage to maybe trade up on, Simba Protective Cubs, other things that have 3 and 4 willpower?
I think that's the natural direction I want to head, but the problem is all of those cards are uninkable.
I mean, that's true. That's fair.
Like
No, that's just a good point. It's fine.
Yeah, it's I do think the card is good. It seems like it should be really good. I just worry that it's not.
If it were inkable, I think it would be like probably in every steel deck.
Yeah, I would just play 4 in all my steel decks probably, because it's just,
that means
the upside is too high.
That means uninkable is a great balance.
Yes. Sometimes too much, but
yeah, especially on cheap stuff, and especially in colors that are pretty hard to fit so many uninkables. But yeah. Next up is Jafar Royal Vizier. There's a 2-cost inkable 3/2, so another thing that can trade into a Simba Protective Cub. In quest for 1, and his ability, I don't trust him, sire. During your turn, this character gains evasive. So very similar to the Cruella, it can challenge evasive things. I think is this exactly the same card? Did the Cruella have a different ability on it too?
No, it's the exact same ability and stats. The functionality difference is the names and the typings on it. Which isn't a huge difference because they both have a shift character.
Right.
Both the shift characters are like not stellar. Funny enough, though, that Corello is a huge boost to Sapphire, and Jafar is like almost not relevant to Steel. Like being able to challenge evasive stuff is fine on this character, but it's way more powerful on the 5-drop we talked about previously, where it lets all your stuff challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Where Steel didn't struggle. Like we already had a great 2-drop that ate Simba Protective Cub in combat. We didn't even need to trade for it. It's just funny how that when you put the same card in different colors, how much differently it can reflect on itself.
I agree.
But yeah, I think this Jafar could easily still see play just as additional things to do that. But it's not like it's an immediately finding a home like the Cruella did.
All right, next up we have Hercules Hero in Training. This is a 2-cost inkable Hercules. That's a 2/3 in quest for 1. No abilities otherwise, but you know what? There's a Hercules with shift. Maybe this is the thing you want to shift onto.
Yeah, this is another Nilla wafer that has just a killer flavor text. No need to call 911 in the Roman numerals.
All right. So next up is a 2-drop that I think is going to be seeing a lot of play. Maybe not in high numbers, but in a lot of steel decks. This is Cinderella, Knight in Training, 2-cost inkable 2/2. The ability is Have Courage. When you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. And a quest for 1. It's also a Cinderella, so it shifts with Cinderella Stout-Hearted, which is maybe the best steel card in the set. What do you think about this one, especially in conjunction with other looting effects?
Yeah, this card's great. The thing about looting is I typically don't want a ton of it because the cards that do it usually are slightly under rate on cost, because obviously they loot. So you don't really want to play like 12 of those cards in your deck, because then you end up with a pretty low average power level, but you do a lot of filtering, but all you're going to find is more things that loot anyway. So there are diminishing returns with these types of effects, but this Cinderella being a 2/2 compared to Simba Future King being a 1/2 is a big upgrade. And then having such a strong shift card to go on top of it in the same color is massive. We see that with Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician all the time, which also coincidentally loots. But, Tiny Tactician is not a card we would play if we didn't have Tinkerbell Giant Fairy.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of lists these days are actually even cutting it because shifting Tinkerbell Giant Fairy is good, but it's like not overly necessary. And it's just hard to fit everything into the deck these days. All right, next up, this is Last Cannon. This is a 1-cost inkable item. The ability is Arm Yourself. Spend 1 and banish this item. Chosen character gains Challenger 3 this turn.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a stinky one. That one is I don't know. I wouldn't
Last canon, more like last resort.
I would rather play anything else. The only thing that's
inkable.
I was gonna say that's the only saving grace is it is inkable. So if it happens to be in your deck at any point, you can just play it as ink. All right, our last card in steel and our last card of the entire set review for Disney's Lorcana Chapter 2, Rise of the Floodborn, is Tiana, Diligent Waitress. There's a 1-cost inkable, 1/3 that quests for 1. I don't know that there's a big Tiana yet, but this is certainly something that could be a shift target later on because Tiana is one of the princesses. And, a 1/3 in steel is not something that we have yet. So it's checking a lot of boxes. Right now, maybe not so good, but maybe in the future it ends up being quite good.
Yeah, it's, again, killer flavor text on these.
Go ahead.
This one reminds me of a good friend of you and I's, Ross Merriam.
Aww.
My place is going to be special with great food to fill people's bellies and hot jazz to feed their souls.
That's pretty good. Yeah, Ross is a huge Utah Jazz fan, so
he's also just an actual like musical jazz fan too.
Oh, nice! I didn't know that.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our set review of Disney's Lorcana Chapter 2, Rise of the Floodborn. Harlan, give me your, let's say, 2 minutes, broad strokes thoughts about the set in general.
I love it. It made the format way more aggressive. There are basically no lame duck control decks anymore. They can't keep up, which is awesome. Nobody wants to play those. You'll be very happy about that as we get back to tournaments and doing coverage. You don't have to worry about everybody going to time all the time. All the best decks in the format draw a bunch of cards, which might be problematic ultimately, but it's fun. Like everybody's wheeling, everybody's picking up their own things that draw cards, everybody's moving their popsicles amongst their game zones and drawing cards. The games are just fun and interesting, and it's Lorcana, so all the decisions matter. You're not necessarily out of any game as long as your deck is built with everything possible in mind. It's great. I love it.
Awesome. I mean, look, they added essentially double the card pool from Chapter 1 Constructed, and a lot of the cards look extremely good. And I'm just excited at all times whenever a new set comes out for a game that I enjoy. And the fact that Lorcana was so deep in their first chapter, now we're getting to essentially re-examine a bunch of things from Chapter 1, and we're getting to look forward to re-examining things from Chapter 2 that can get better down the line. I'm on board with you completely, 100%, and I look forward to playing a bunch of Constructed. We're the Lost Boys. We make competitive content for Disney's Lorcana. We do commentary. We play events. We can gunsling. If you have a store that is running Disney's Lorcana events, reach out to us, and we can maybe come to your store and provide you one of our services. That's going to do it for today's video, and it's going to complete our set review for Rise of the Floodborn. I'm Tandy. That's Harlan. Say bye, Harlan.
Bye, Harlan.